and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Malaysia's first Women's Tribunal is set to take place online on the 27th and 28th of November. It's organised by the Joint Action Group for Gender Equality, or better known as JAG, as well as Engender Consultancy. And the idea is to behind this virtual tribunal is to hold space for a diverse group of women, especially marginalised women, to share their stories of violations and injustices that they've experienced. So joining me on the show today to tell us a little bit more about Malaysia's first Women's Tribunal are co-conveners of the tribunal, Mira, Samantha and Watsala Naidu. Welcome, guys. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm so excited to learn more about the tribunal. When I first heard about it, it piqued my interest. I was like, oh, this sounds interesting, but what is it? And I'm sure that many of us have probably come across this on social media, or we've seen some of the postings, or maybe heard about it in the media. But maybe you can tell us more specifically about what a women's tribunal is. Mira, let's begin with you. I seem to understand that this tribunal has some global roots, right?
Perhaps I could share with you in two sentences what the tribunal is, and then talk about the origins of it, and then I'll go to the global.
Sure.
So, the Women's Tribunal is a tribunal of conscience created by women, by all of us here, to draw attention on critical issues. So, as you said just now, we will be creating a space to hear testimonies regarding some of the injustices that women have faced in Malaysia. Women from all ages, from different races, from different backgrounds, and from different parts of Malaysia. So, how the idea came about was with Ivy Josia, who is the convener of the tribunal. Well, she sent out a message to us on WhatsApp. We have a CEDAW advocacy chat group,
Okay.
and that was sometime in mid-January, I think 22nd of January of this year. She
Okay.
sent out a message to us on a CEDAW advocacy chat group. So CEDAW is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, where the government of Malaysia had ratified it in 1995, where they agreed to be committed to fulfill, protect, and respect the rights of women. And this is an international obligation that they had committed to. So we have this chat group, and when Malaysia submits to CEDAW, the UN will come back with recommendations. So Ivy was saying, hey, look, we keep doing the same thing with the CEDAW recommendations by UN. Can we do something different? Can we think out of the box? She said, hey, how about a women's tribunal? So we all like jumped on that idea and said, yes. So I was so excited. So all of us in that chat group went back to our respective organizations within JAG, which is about 14 organizations, and we got the go ahead from our
Mm-hmm.
organizations. So what happened is then we set up a steering committee which consists of the 13 organizations came on board. So
Right.
there were two reps from each organization represented in the steering committee. And that's when our work started on the 3rd of February this year. And that's where we formed subcommittees. We had the issues committee looking at evidence. Then we had the finance committee. I think we had the communications committee, the
Mm-hmm.
risk mitigation committee, publicity committee, the legal team committee, the
Right.
advisors committee. We had many committees. So,
Okay.
as co conveners, Vachila and I were helming the issues committee, and that was the most, I think, challenging part of all,
Okay.
because that's where the substantive of the issues that will be raised during the tribunal by
Right.
the women. So deciding on which testimonies.
Okay, so you say it's a tribunal of conscience. I'm going to come back to the global roots a little bit, Mira, but I do want to find out. I mean, so that we can picture what this tribunal might entail. What exactly would it look like when you say it's a tribunal of conscience? Well, Stella, maybe you can tell us. I mean, in terms of what to expect, how would we expect proceedings to take place?
Uh, this was a really interesting experience for us as well. Given COVID-19 and some level of restrictions and need to adapt to SOPs and so on. So the tribunal is actually going to be fully hosted virtually. So it's going to be on video conferencing platform one in Zoom. But what we've tried to ensure is accessibility. That's going to be key for us. Uh, to allow for both BM and speakers and English speakers to be able to engage, but also adding on the inclusivity aspect, we are also having Bahasa Isyarat Malaysia, as part of the process and all. In terms of the days, it's an event that's actually going to span across like about a few days. We start on the 27th and the 28th of November. Now, this is going to be the Saturday and Sunday, end of the month, actually, where in terms of process, we would have witnesses come forth, share their lived experiences, as what Mira shared earlier, right? Their experiences in terms of how discrimination, the different violations, discriminations they've experienced, the challenges in trying to seek, redress, access to justice, and so on. So after the witnesses come, we would have advocates also, of course, speaking on specific issues, trying to draw a clearer picture, making the connection, showing us the prevalence and trends about these issues. Yeah. One of the toughest thing that we had to do, and I'm still having sleepless nights over this, thinking about it, was when we had to really prioritize and narrow
Mm.
down the issues. We
Oh,
Right.
started off
it's a
with
challenge here.
we did a complete, like we did a bucket list of issues. We literally did a mind map.
No, no, we started off with us saying we'll do a few issues, and it just grew and
And
grew
grew
and
and
grew.
grew. Yeah.
Right.
And we had to narrow it down. And then we said, hey, actually, let's just prioritize, 7 to 8 key issues. And that then, brought us to a bit, okay, maybe these issues would require some level of clustering. We looked at how, we have to study and address the challenges within our constitutional and legal framework, economic and livelihood consideration, family life, violence against women, women in public participation, and then gender identity and sexual orientation and gender identity, education and health. So these were key issues. And of course, within these issues, the women who have experienced the challenges will talk about many intersecting elements. So we would have women, represented from all walks of the society, representing the different parts of Malaysia. So we're trying to avoid this, very Klang Valley
Right.
centric
Yeah.
Bangsa bubble discussion, right? So,
Hey,
so literally unpacking the divide, and that was crucial for us because this is where, as part of the process, we needed to make sure that we had voices that we wanted to hear from everybody, right? And we started looking for the witnesses, identifying women who are willing to step out and speak out. And this is actually the second challenge because we know of many women who have, and most of us at some level have experienced some form of violations, discrimination, for example, right? That's very gender based. But it's not easy to get women to speak up. And that's why this space and this platform is going to be absolutely crucial for us. So after the women provide the testimonies and then we have the advocates speak, we would then have a few days where the judges will then deliberate and they would deliver their findings and recommendations on the 4th of December. So they will hear from, about 25 to 28 witnesses. Now, one thing we are also very conscious about is some of the witnesses may perhaps fear certain risk,
Right.
Yeah,
Right. It
stigmatization,
could it could be
yeah.
sensitive or there's
yeah,
privacy
yeah.
issues.
Exactly,
Right.
We've thought of
exactly.
that. Yeah,
Yeah. So, in that context, there are, of course, women, we've tried to create a safe space as possible,
Right.
a really enabling environment, and we encourage them to speak out and provide their testimonies via Zoom, right? But we also recognize that some of them may be more comfortable with pre recorded statements. Some of them may want to remain anonymous. Have their video switched off or photos blurred. But then we also had to consider that sometimes infrastructures may not necessarily be in place. Internet access could be a problem. So we're also looking at pre-recorded statements. But ultimately, it is to figure out and break the barriers so that women can
Mm,
speak up.
that's
but
So,
amazing.
I
Right.
also think it's important to highlight, Rashla, that as you said, how women, some of the witnesses are fearful in speaking up, and the trauma that they, secondary trauma or third,
mhm.
trauma that they go through, a lot of them have gone through it. So we have a counselor at hand who they can
Right.
speak to, an NGO who will support them, and a counselor who will support them.
We're going to have to take a quick break here on the show, but again, there's so much to cover. I'm going to come back and then continue this conversation, particularly looking at how to bring this out in terms of more of a conversation about some of the injustices, so it goes beyond the tribunal. Okay, well, stay tuned. We'll be right back. When you were saying, you were talking a little bit earlier, Ursula, about the different witnesses and the areas that this tribunal might cover and how difficult it was to narrow that down. I was really curious to uh, ask you both about the necessity of having a women's tribunal. What necessitates the fact that we need one women's tribunal in Malaysia? I'm just wondering. I mean, is there a lack of access to justice for these women who are not able to perhaps access justice, that they might need to, that we might need to have a women's tribunal for their testimonies to be heard? Mira, what do you think?
Yes, certainly. I think if you talk about going to the courts,
Mm.
that's quite expensive. As lawyers, I know how much one has to pay, even just to file a statement of claim, and seeking a lawyer who would act in the best interest and has also the insight of a gender, looking at the gender impact, and looking from a gender lens. Not every lawyer has that. There are some who do, but there are very few.
Mm.
That's one. And I think we started off why we needed, why is it now that we are looking at tribunal is, of course, as Vachla mentioned, the pandemic has already forced us to look at different ways. And that was the only good thing about the pandemic, I would say, made us rethink our strategies. But,
Mhm.
because for decades, for 3 decades, we have been doing the same thing, meeting the ministers, writing memorandums, doing protests here and there, uh, talking to MPs, lobbying here and there. And have things changed? Yes, a bit has, but certainly not enough.
Mhm.
Certainly not where we should be. Three
Mm.
decades. So we really want to hold the government accountable for all the obligations that they promised to make, they promised to adhere to. And it is not just enough having laws, you need to implement it. So
Mhm.
this is the only way we can do to popularize women's rights to the public at large, for the public at large to understand exactly what a woman goes through. It's only some of us within the women's movement who would have spoken to the women and understand. But this one, it brings it to your doorstep to understand the lived realities, the trauma, the effects not just on her but also her family and people around her. So it's popularizing it to the public at large, I think, is another very important step for us. And also, uh, I think it's very important to say we are reimagining justice.
Right. When you say that, what I picture with this tribunal is perhaps some of these women don't, lack access to justice through structural barriers, through of gender equality. And the way this tribunal works is that you go, you give your testimony, and there is a judge that looks in the framework of gender equality and legislation and perhaps makes a ruling. What Shala, maybe you can tell us a little bit the role of the judge. I'm quite curious about that, because you said the judge will go away and make a ruling on the so-called case. How do we think about that? So what is that that element of the tribunal?
I think we don't want to create this perception that this is an adversarial process, or it's going to look like a court proceedings, right? It's
Right.
actually a really constructive space, safe space for women to come up, and what we are doing is providing the platform to locate the issues within and bring out the voices of women without it being an adversarial. So it's not going to be a situation where the courts are there's going to be cross-examination, for example, a judges
Right.
cross-examining, or advocates or lawyers representing different parties. It is really, once the judges hear the testimonies from the witnesses and they get a clear picture, the discussion between the judges and the witnesses will be in the form of queries, clarification, not
Okay.
confrontational at
Right. So
all,
it's
basically.
not hostile, right?
It's
Okay.
completely not. It's a very we it's going to be, and I'm saying this with confidence, I would say, a secure space for women to
Right.
really speak out and be heard. And I think that is
True.
the need to create this space, because it's always us, civil society organizations, lawyers who are always out there speaking out, on the issues. But how often have we heard from the women directly? The lived realities of the women. That is so crucial for us. So even when the judges go away to deliberate, they again, that it's not so much a ruling with respect to specific cases or testimonies or evidences which are produced, right?
I
It
see.
is more a deliberation on the issues which were surfaced, the impact, and where the state has actually failed to complete and fulfill its obligations, international commitments, and at the national level. So they will come back with their findings and a set of recommendations, which are going to be very, very practical in terms of how the state could consider different ways of
Oh, that's
implementing their
great.
obligations, and also looking at the role of different actors, because it's not just the state, right? Well, because states don't work in vacuum. So where are the civil society organization? Where are the different actors? In fact, what we are also doing is there are two processes at the beginning of the tribunal on day one. As part of the opening itself, we already want to locate the discussion within international standards. So we have invited CEDAW committee chair and other CEDAW committee members to come and give us an opening statement. We've also gotten, we will also have the chair of SUHAKAM, our National Human Rights Institution, to also be part of the opening and deliver a statement. Yeah. But right at the end of the process, we are sending out invitation. We have already invited the Ministry of Women, the Minister of Women herself, and different ministries and line agencies and so on. And we would also be creating the space on the 4th of December, after the judges deliver their findings and recommendations, to provide a response. This, as we said, we don't want to turn it into we are not attacking the state.
Right. It's the idea is to be inclusive and make it conducive for change to happen. Okay, I love the spirit of this tribunal already, but I do want to ask you. I mean, how do we ensure that it's not just this kind of one weekend, one off? How do we ensure that the conversations continue, the momentum continues, that we're, that the women who, were brave enough to share their testimonies are speaking to something more, contributing their voice to something, to make a difference, for others. How do we, as the public, as the media, as policymakers who may be listening, what would you like them to continue doing, Mira?
Okay, there are several levels here. First is, of course, the ministry, the findings, the recommendations that the judges will make. We will be putting it up on our website, the Women's Tribunal website. So we will use it through our social media. We will start highlighting it through social media, and we hope the social media activists, from not just the women's rights, civil society activists, just ordinary Malaysians, will take it up and highlight it and pressure the government. So it is not just the civil society groups, but ordinary Malaysians to highlight it
Right.
themselves. That's
Okay.
Mhm.
one. Secondly, is of course we will continue having meetings with the ministries and all. And as we said, this is looking at state obligations. I think there are another two important areas that we should and we will look at is the corporations. You
Okay.
know, the corporations have a role to play, the public, the private sector.
Mm.
I want, we hope, not I want, we hope that the corporations will listen. This is a perfect opportunity for them to listen to the stories that you hear. We
Mhm.
look at
Okay.
to understand what happens to women in employment, in health, in different sectors. And I mean, when we talk about corporations, there are people behind it. There are men and women behind it. And to them, I want them to know, look, it could, there's a reasonable possibility that it could happen to your sister, to your auntie, to your grandma, to your mother, to anyone.
Mhm.
And stop to think that it could happen. And it is a reality. So do check your corporate behavior. And we want to change that corporate mindset. That is important. And the third thing I want to say is the media. Like today, Melissa, I mean, we are talking about it. We hope there will be others who will log on to it. And the media can play a very important role because you're a strong ally for us. And we need the media to raise awareness and change that mindset, to
Mm.
have and to start lobbying for change. And it has to be a duty and responsibility of all of us.
And to keep it at the forefront of people's minds. Wasala, in the couple of minutes that we have left, maybe for those who are really keen to learn more about the tribunal, who perhaps want to get involved, want to participate, how do we find out more information, or how do we do that?
Okay, so we will be sharing the website link. Everybody can go to the Women's Tribunal Malaysia.com website. It's both in English and in Bahasa, and they can register there for their participation. We encourage people who would like to access the interpretation services to register, especially BM English and Bahasa Isyarat Malaysia. That's only available via Zoom. All
Mm.
of participants of general public are also able to view this live, because
Facebook Live.
it will also be streamed live via Facebook. Yeah.
Mm.
So there are different ways of participating, viewing, engaging in discussions on this. I also want to raise one other interesting thing that's happening as part of this tribunal. On day 3, which is like after we've gone through 2 days of listening to the testimonies and statements from the advocates, we have a Path Day festival, a feminist festival. Basically, it's
Oh,
about Kebahagiaan Dirimu festival.
Yeah.
It's about us, right? Self-care and women,
oh, I love that.
literally enjoying
It's
who
so
we are.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about really, again, it's about reimagining, how we carry forward our advocacy with levels of creativity, inclusivity. So we'll have music, poetry, creative dialogue. So there were many things that we'll be having on that day. So please also register. It's all free, and there'll be some very interesting hamper. Our women's arts festival coordinator is not here because she's always very excited to show the hampers. But yeah, it's about us.
How exciting to, it sounds really festive and a wonderful way to kind of end the tribunal on this feeling of solidarity and empowerment and celebration. That sounds really interesting. I'm personally really looking forward to this, and
do register,
I'm
Melissa.
so excited that you've brought this to our doorstep. I'm hoping this is the first of many tribunals here in Malaysia, and I'm very excited and happy for both of you and the team at JAG as well as Engender Consultancy. Thank you both so much for being on the show today. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you both, and good luck with the tribunal. And thank you so much for all your hard work.
Thank you.